Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Geeks from the Multiverse. This week, we are continuing our Walking Dead series by discussing character evolution from page to screen. That's right, from the comic books to the TV show. And did the characters stay true to their comic book counterparts, or did the TV show take way too many creative liberties? That's what we're going to find out. So let's get geeky. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Geeks from the Multiverse. I am one of your hosts, Matt, aka Mr. Grumpy Beard, and with me, as always,
is Johnny Boy, aka Captain Lustache. Anyways, boys and girls, we got a couple things, actually, now I'm thinking about it. I never did ask you this last episode, Matt. What was, if you had to decide between the comics or the TV show, which one would you prefer?
Probably the TV show.
Now, why? Why would that be the case?
The TV show is easier to digest.
I mean, yes, I know visually speaking, yes, you are correct. That would be easier to look at and do all that. But I was just saying, like, in the last episode, like, the comics were more, I feel like the story plot, if, like, I was missing a lot of it, then clearly, or, like, the different versions of it, I mean, I would say that at least this would be more direct, and it would actually follow maybe, hopefully, a better story to a degree. At least, like, because if this was actually the blueprint for the show, this could have been a completely different show, and it could have been.
And I know what you're saying. I'm downloading the file. I'm picking up what you're putting down. If that,
No, I know what you mean.
You know what I'm saying. But at the same time, the books. Unlike, they do have pictures and I can see the pictures, but I do also have to, not that I, am one that's like, reading, but at the same time, reading. Like, I'm also not going to, like, if I'm watching Game of Thrones, I'm not just going to, like, look over and be like, oh, dude, I should read Game of Thrones before I watch Game of Thrones. Like, fuck that. Like, I'm also not going to read Lord of the Rings before I watch Lord of the Rings.
I'm going to say, well, that's too much for Lord of the Rings. That's way too much.
But, like, I understand that's the blueprint. And I'm not saying it's not important, but what I'm saying is, like, I would go to the show because, one, not that yes, reading is not that difficult and I can read it, but, like, part of my brain also has to interpret what is going on in the story as far as context. And with the show, I don't have to interpret context because the context is, is more spelled out in the show than it is in the book. Where, like you're saying, like, that picture of Shane, we don't know if he's just, like, in pain, in that physical anguish, or if he's pissed, or what he's doing, because we just don't know. And that's my interpretation. Or your interpretation, or that guy walking down the street's interpretation. I don't know. It's different.
I didn't realize we were outside. Do you see that guy over there?
Oh, yeah, he's right over there.
Oh, I didn't know. It must be that wall we were looking at because I didn't see any guy in here, but I don't know.
He's right over there.
Are you high right now? Do I need to?
Maybe.
No, I just figured because, like I said, the comics, they were just, at least with story, I think story-wise, I think I would give it to the comics. I think you're right when it comes to, like, the concept and the conceptualization of, like, certain things and understanding what's really kind of happening. But like I said, if they were to actually look at their comics and actually do it in the show, we could have had a completely different show. And they're also, first of all, you never would have had Daryl and a few others, but
that's true. But I mean, I would still choose the show. I think the show does what it does, and not to put it, the show was created by Robert Kirkman, so it's not like you're getting, The Walking Dead created by, Tom Dick. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like you're getting a show created by some other dude. you're getting The Walking Dead created by the creator of Walking Dead. You know what I mean? So
True.
You're getting a show on TV that was created by this dude who wrote The Walking Dead. So at some level, yes, this was created in 2003. So maybe the way that he wrote Carol for these books, by the time the show rolled around, was like, you know what? I should have wrote Carol a little bit different. Why don't we do her a little bit different in the show? And that's where we have the Carol that we have now. And I don't know. I would choose the show because, one, maybe my brain is just dead in that way. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not putting the comics down at all, but I think those are important as far as the blueprint. But I think if I was going to make a choice, I would go to the show because the show is at least easier to digest, and I can get the gist of the Walking Dead world and the universe based on the show.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, the only other, well, actually, real quick before we dive into the characters here. So I know we haven't talked about the fantasy league in a little bit. I'm only going to mention this. Yes, Matt won the league. Okay, he's the champion for our fantasy league this year. Doesn't mean next year. This year. Okay, so take it up and soak it in whatever glory you want. So yes, I know it was actually a couple weeks ago now, technically. Yes, he won, and he was boasting about it. He was doing his thing, whatever. Yeah, go ahead, do your little whoop whoop, or whatever you're going to play. Yeah, there you go.
There it is. I had to find it. I don't know.
Anyways, no, I mean, yes, and I know that we will.
The Dathomir Ballers, baby.
Yeah, and I know. And then the worst part is he actually put a photo. I believe it was on our Facebook.
I did, yeah. Darth Maul in a football jersey holding up a trophy. I
was like, you son of a bitch. I was like, okay. And then I love how he does it already ahead. He's like, oh, you did it. I was like, don't worry. And then he's like, well, maybe I'm definitely going to change my name. I got to come up with a better name. I definitely do. I need to come up with something better. But anyways, I just figured I'd let you guys know if you care. It's whatever. We just wanted to mention it. Yes, he won. So yes, hopefully next year, I'm sorry, Jeff. I understand that, you want to leave, and that's okay. It's fine. We get it. You do you. We're gonna make sure that we have a continuing on. So if anyone wants to come and join us, by all means, let us know. But if not, then it's fine. We'll just
2025 is going to be bigger and better. We're making changes to the roster, lineup settings. We're making changes to the scoring systems. We're going to make some big changes. So yeah, if you guys want to join our league for next year, you can send me a message.
Yeah, send Matt a message.
And we can talk about it, and I can send you an invite when we renew. And yeah,
come and join us. Yeah, because I mean, not saying we don't like people. We just want to make sure that we're trying to make it more interesting, because it seems like every time that I've been doing this now, and I know Matt's done so many. We want more people to like, oh, hey, you want to trade? Hey, you want to do this? It is what it is, right? We're just trying to make it more interesting. I mean, again, it's a free league. It's not something you pay for. It's nothing like special like that. But just, keep in mind that, we're just trying to do it to have fun. That's really all it is. But anyways, I know we're just kind of going on a tangent, but let's go dive into
I like that tangent, actually.
Oh, well, I know you do, but I figured we're going to talk about it, and I feel like we're not going to get actually to the nitty gritty. So let's talk about these characters, man.
So yeah, obviously, a huge part of The Walking Dead is its characters. It's not the zombies. It's not, the focus is its characters. Unlike any other zombie, media that exists right now, as great as it may be, you have great, there are great zombie movies. I'm not going to obviously name them all, but
I mean, you could name one, which I know you were surprised you haven't mentioned it.
I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to mention any of them, but like there are a ton of great movies, and unlike most of them, like they focus on the zombies and the maybe on the cure or whatever. They're not so much focused on like what the characters are going through, and that's where the characters are so vital to the Walking Dead. Telling those like deeply personal stories of just survival and the morality and the humanity of each of the characters. And this is where you don't get a lot of that in a regular zombie film or a lot of these different weird shows like Z Nation, which is kind of a comedy at the same time. But you just don't get a lot of that. And the zombies, like we said last week, like they're almost like part of the background, the environment, or an obstacle. They're not the main part of the story.
Right. And like we were talking about, like I said, with the fact that the characters really, that's like your biggest, like in the show was the biggest problem was these other characters or these antagonists that were causing more shit for them to like figure out and like to get out of certain situations. I mean, because we never really kind of dived into it, but yeah, they got into some pretty sticky situations and certain things that caused them to be like, oh shit, what do we do? And of course, that's how they lose people or whatever, or maybe the place that they're living at, because it just depends on what they're doing.
Yeah, and that was Kirkman's intention for the comic to begin with, was to be an ongoing story where characters are just deeply flawed and they're constantly changing, and they're in positions where they're never truly in a safe spot. And in The Walking Dead, if whether you watch the show or you read the book, these characters are never in a safe spot. Like wherever they go, there's always a conflict.
Oh my God. I mean, the amount of times they've had to move is ridiculous. I mean, I'm going to say this, a little fun fact. I've moved 20, I would say like 25 times or more, probably in my lifetime. I'm not saying they're like that bad. What I'm saying is that they get pretty bad enough where they're just like, oh, okay, we found this. For example, the prison. Oh, we found this prison. It's great. No, it's not, because what happens?
Well, like, the governor happened on that one. And
no, but like, you know what I mean? There's just something else comes along and they just, it all gets fucked up and you're like, well, shit, here we go. Let's go somewhere else now. But that's what I mean. It's like, how do you get out of these situations all the time? And now they're constantly moving. It's funny though, that they start out small and then they go to like big places. And it's like, it's crazy to see the development of like where they came from to then finally where they're ending up at the
and this is where the TV show really adapted this, the creative choices that Kirkman made for the TV show, just enhanced the drama of these, bigger villains like the wolves and the whisperers and they really prolonged that tension to appeal, obviously to the audience of, the whisperers, where they would have like these, 1,000, zombie horde just moving around. Like it was just crazy where in earlier seasons, like you wouldn't see that. Like if you saw a horde, it was like maybe 30, 40, maybe 100. But like, when you saw the whisperers, like they were moving and like they would fill a city with how many they were actually moving around in. Like it was crazy.
Well, and that's what I mean. Like you're right. Cause like in the beginning, when you saw those like 30 or 40, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah. Oh shit. Like we're not
prepared for this. But now when you see like, you're mentioning the whisperers and there's like thousands of them and you're like, well, shit, we're really fucked now, or we got to get the hell out of here as quick, fast, in a hurry. So, and that was the thing. It's like, how do you move that quickly, especially when there's 1,000 of them coming right after you or doing something in the between? But yeah, no.
So yeah, it's one of the questions, that we have for this episode, and you can answer it in the comments. You can, if you want to go to Facebook or whatever, or send us a message, send us an email. You can put it on a pigeon. I really don't care. But the question is, when does a character's evolution serve the story better, by sticking to the original vision or reinventing them for a new medium?
So this time I'm gonna let you answer this one, and then I'll give you my take on it.
So this one's tricky for me because we say this all the time. We say stick to the blueprint
or follow the blueprint, whatever you want to call it. But yeah.
And for the most part, like I agree with this, but for TV, sometimes you do need to venture off of the blueprint when it comes to TV.
Hold on. So before you go any further, that means you also have to come up with ideas and have a writing team that knows what they're doing.
Imagination.
But anyways, go ahead.
But yeah, so you do need to venture off of the blueprint to add depth that's not written or expressed, because it doesn't translate for television or on screen. So like, this is kind of what we were talking about towards, I think, the end of last week's episode, where you can look at a picture, but it doesn't translate to what the emotion is. And so you can't just like take what's on there and be like, yeah, we're going to do exactly that. Well, what is that? I don't know. Well, that's the point. Like, you have to venture off of this and kind of create something, new to serve the story better for television. Now, I will say characters should never be, 100% reinvented.
No.
And I would even be bold to say, like, you should never, like, the number I would say is 50%, but I would probably go more, like, a little less, than maybe 35. I don't know what the number is, but like, if you have to go more than 50% and you have to, like, we're going to reinvent this character 50% of who they are. One, the character sucks. If you have to change half of who that character already is.
That's true.
Like, you've created a shitty character where you have to change 50% of who that character is. The character sucks. Or you just haven't really invested a whole lot. Like, I would say Carol is one of them. You took Carol and she dies in this book. Plain and simple. She commits suicide in this book. And in the show, you completely rewrite her whole character. And you give her almost I'm not going to say 90%, but it has to be a pretty high percentage of a story.
So I guess this is just going to be me trying to do this take now. So I think I pretty much agree with you that yes, there are certain things that you cannot translate, at least emotion wise, from a comic book into, an actual television show or movie. So like the reason why, and I'm only going to throw this as an example, but like, yes, we mentioned The Last of Us because it is a prime example of how when you take something visually like a video game and you put it on the big screen and do the video game adaptation, and then it's almost identical to what you're looking at in the game and in the show. Not everything's identical. There's a couple things that are a slight difference, or just like in other games, technically, there's a difference between that because you're seeing it already visually and you already know what they're doing. And then you're seeing it on the big screen because now you're like, oh my God, this is great. Or even an animated show or whatever, right? So like if you saw it, it's different like that. But like when you're taking a book or, well, I guess comics, whatever, I guess they're the same thing. If you're taking a book, it's very hard because what you may be seeing, like, or picture-wise, or you could see, or at least reading it out loud to yourself, it's a whole nother ballgame because you're now interpreting the emotions and all this other stuff. So it's very hard to kind of dive into, what are they going to physically do? So yes, you have to be a little bit, creative and have to kind of like envision what you would think that the audience would want to see and like, looking at what your blueprint is. But again, to going into now the characters, I would say, this is just me, I would do 80-20. I would do 80, like keep original, 20% of like there's the like minor little quirks or minor little things that are not really as important to the story, right? So like the 20% you can kind of get a little creative with in certain ways. As long as it's still true to the story, that's fine. Maybe there's a slight difference of like, oh, well, instead of blonde hair, he's got black hair. I don't know, something stupid or minute, right? Nothing that's going to be like, oh my God, it's going to like change the entire story. Things like that, sure, whatever. But if you're like, hey, so, like you said, Carol, she commits suicide. Okay, now we're just going to straight up say, hey, you know what, we're just going to completely change that story and she's now going to become a badass. Okay, I'm not saying that it would have been a great thing or a bad thing, but if that was the original story for her and her arc, then I would have just kept it. And then, for example, Carl, hey, Carl, like him, instead of killing him off later on in time, you could have kept him. And maybe that could have changed the story or the outline of how the future seasons of The Walking Dead could have changed a little bit. But
yeah, we'll get into Carl in a little bit on that one.
No, but
there's a reason for it, and we'll get into that.
I figured there would be, but no, but that would be my take because that's where I would see, characters in the story. Again, you need to have a good I would honestly say you need to have good writers. If you don't have good writers or people that know how to tell a story,
I agree. I mean, I don't. I mean, the word reinvent is really a bad word
because we try to reinvent all things. Like, think about all the movies that have been done that were basically back in, like, I'm going to scroll, let's say 40s till about like 70s. We'll say the 40s to 70s. For some weird reason, people, what they do is like The Parent Trap. I'm just going to throw a random example. That movie was done in the 60s. They did it again in the early 2000s, and then they just did one again recently again. I'm not saying you do whatever, but what I am saying is you have the idea that was already done in the past. Now we're going to take that same thing and then just put it in a more modern time. That's not reinventing the wheel, my friend. That is just taking an idea that is now in the past and then doing it all over again and revamping it. That's not reinventing. That's just, I'm just going to steal an idea. That's all you're doing. And you're just revamping.
Yeah,
it
I think that becomes like the normal of like when you're taking a character and you're like, okay, well, this is who the character is, and like you're like, okay, well, I want to kind of write and make this story. We need to make the story a little bit better. So we need to kind of do some creative stuff to make the story better. And now, you're taking that 20% and you're moving the needle. So now, like, the character is not who the character is in the book. And now you're taking that 20% where, maybe the character was, maybe he was awkward and nerdy. And now he's like more of like a semi, leader kind of role. And you're moving the needle a little bit more. And well, now he's a soldier, and it's like, where are you going with this? Because now you're almost reinventing this character who is kind of this nerdy dork, and now he's like,
the most powerful leader in the group.
Yeah, now he's like a soldier, and like, where are you going with this? Because now you're just reinventing character. But they're doing that. I mean, Marvel is kind of doing this the opposite way, where they're like, well,
we're gonna downplay him.
Let's take this character and like, we're going to either change genders or change races, and we're going to make this character have different powers. And, you take, Miss Marvel, not Captain Marvel. I mean, they did it with Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel was a man.
Well, technically, but also, it's kind of hard with that because like it's Captain Marvel is the way you would say it. But yes, but he was more, it was like distant. I mean, they still did a Captain Marvel, like, female, but yes.
But Miss Marvel in the comics had different powers than in the show. In the show, they gave her some, cosmic power.
It was an embiggen is what they call it. But it was, so Kamala Khan really is like, and this is where I always say that Marvel's Avengers game kind of did it justice in that sense. Her original powers were supposed to be like, kind of like Mr. Fantastic.
Yes.
Same idea. But then in the show, they're like, oh, hey, we're going to do this like cosmic jewel thing. And then like, she's just going to grow these like pairs of arms that are just going to somehow spiritually come out of her hands or something like that. And it's like, no, like she needs to be like Mr. Fantastic in that sense of the stretching ability.
And that's where we're saying like character should never be. And that was like almost like a reinvention of who the character was. Well, and that's where we're saying like, it shouldn't happen like that.
No, it shouldn't. And that's where this is where we should move on because yes, I know we all agree that.
All right, so let's dive into the characters. So obviously, the very first one we'll talk about is the main character of who is the Walking Dead, which is
basically the guy who is the main person that is basically we're following the story along.
We're following this is his story, which is Rick Grimes, Richard Grimes. Hey, Richard.
Or Dick. Dick. No, I'm sorry.
So he's the central protagonist. He's the moral compass of the series. He's a I guess you could say former because, I mean, there's really no sheriffs anymore.
Oh, that's him.
But Rick, he, in the book, he's immediately like, they're on a call from some escaped prisoners.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
In the show, I don't know if they really say like they're escaped prisoners, but
well, I was wondering if that is the case, though, would that be the same prison that they went to, or was that a totally different prison? That would always be my question. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like the escape one that they're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, I don't know. I was just a random thought. I just thought of it. I was like, is that the same one that they went to?
I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, just thought to the hot.
Yeah. So they're, I mean, obviously they're, I'm not going to review the whole thing, but yeah. So they go on a call and he gets shot, and, in the hospital, he wakes up from a coma to find the world overrun by the undead. And that's kind of like where his world starts. He has no idea what's going on because this whole thing happened when he was in a coma.
Right. Now, I couldn't remember. Was it like weeks that he was in a coma?
I want to say it was probably longer, but...
Oh, okay. Because I was wondering how long it really was between when he was on the call and then like he just wakes up in the hospital. Because I know you don't know everything, and that's okay. I don't know for how long. I mean, if you're going by the show... It really depends on how long flowers die, because the flowers were dry. Oh.
And I mean, if it was months, I would say that the flowers probably would have been already
rotting,
molding and rotty. And, but the flowers were dry where he was when he was, playing with the petals, they were flaking off. So,
yeah.
But, so anyways, he's the show really follows his story, more than anybody else's, but it's really, wherever Rick goes, really it's, the group in Atlanta, he meets the group at Herschel's farm, then they go to the prison, and then, obviously, Alexandria, and, we follow Rick. That's really where we're going.
We follow Rick here
until he goes in season 9 or whatever his exit is on the show. But his leadership is marked by, this relentless determination to protect his family. His family is obviously first. And then it really just becomes his family, the group. He grapples with moral compromises because obviously he was a sheriff. So it's really him protecting, not killing the living, protecting people who are innocent, that kind of stuff. But it's you see him going through this psychological toll of just leadership and losing people, and it's just this this nonstop journey that he goes through every time he loses somebody. Or
well, it's also weird because you also see like you were just saying about loss and everything, but then there's moments of happiness, very small bits, very, very in between little things. But you see it enough where he's okay, now I'm getting back in this gear. And then all of a sudden he loses another person. You're ah, shit, now we got to start all over again.
Yeah.
And it's,
you see it right in the show. And then right in the beginning, when he, he feels personally responsible for leaving Merle on the roof.
Right.
Even though Merle was a dick.
That's why I said Daryl. If Merle was still around, Merle would have been basically Daryl and became the badass. But again, with Daryl, if Merle didn't leave or basically die, Daryl would have never became the person that he became later on. You know what I mean? That. Yeah. That's where, unfortunately, there are, like I said, there are certain losses that develop those characters into the people that they become later on, and especially Daryl in this case, and potentially Rick because of Shane.
So yeah, some key moments. Some of these come directly from the book. Some are not in the show per se, but in the book, he loses his hand to the governor. So the governor is who actually cuts his hand off.
Okay.
He leading the group to Alexandria. He has a scene in the book that's the iconic phone scene. I don't know if that's exactly in the show, but in the comics, it depicts Rick. He receives a call from a woman, and I do the quotations from a woman. And he has a couple conversations with this woman on the phone, who he kind of talks to her, and he's talking about meeting up with her as far as being, part of bringing her into the group. And this is after Lori was already killed by the governor. just to give a little bit of context. Yes, in the book, the governor actually kills Lori, just FYI.
Fair enough.
After they talk a few times, yes, they make plans for him and Carl to meet up. And when he asks her name, she says that it's Lori.
Interesting.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, even though he pulls the cord out of the wall, he continues to talk to her and then eventually hangs up, calling her crazy.
Interesting.
But the thing that you have to realize that this is The Walking Dead. It's not like this is the real world of today where AT&T is running a Walking Dead phone service.
Oh, I mean,
so the phone right. actually never worked, even if it was plugged into the wall. So there was no actual phone service on this phone. And like the whole scene, like that was played out in the books, was something that he was like playing out in his own mind, where he was talking to this woman who sounded like Lori.
Okay.
And he was talking to her, and he was like, "Yeah, Carl and I can meet up with you. Like, where are you?" And he's talking to her, and when he gets the name, you see like the look on his face, and it's like. It's just sheer horror on his face because he's like, Lori, like
my wife, Lori, hello.
Yeah. And then like, he hangs up the phone and like, Carl was like, who's that on the phone? And he was like, oh, just some crazy woman.
I love how they just like nonchalant, just your mother. It's okay. Don't worry about it.
He's like, just some crazy woman. Like, but it's like, the phone never worked in the first place. It was a broken phone, and there's no phone service. It's freaking Walking Dead. Like,
well, that's the problem with like the TV show, because anything goes basically, right? Because it's like, in the comics, I guess you can just do whatever the hell you want because it doesn't matter, right? Because you're right. In real life, no, because if nobody's operating the system, doesn't mean the phones are going to work.
Phones never work. So at the, I think at the end of the series, the Walking Dead series, like in the books. He's still alive, actually, and his influence like wanes as Carl like gets older and he matures into a, he eventually matures into that leader that Rick is
right
now. And, obviously as he gets older, like he becomes the leader that Rick is. So that's kind of where, that's how that ends in the book. Andrew Lincoln, now we know he's Rick in the show. I think he was like the perfect choice for Rick. I mean, the emotional depth that he had, I don't think that there's anybody else that at this point could pull off Rick.
No, I mean, because it's kind of like, when we talk about like Wolverine or like Captain America. You're looking at those two roles, for example, like iconic, or even Deadpool, right? Like you're looking at those three, like you wouldn't imagine anybody else playing those roles now because they're already been cemented into the legacy. So like with him, I agree, but I actually didn't know if like I've never seen him once in anything else prior to this is what I'm about to say. Cause like, I didn't know of him until I started watching the show.
I'm sure he's been in other stuff, but I don't know.
I'll look it up.
I don't know what else he's been in, but just the differences and moral struggles, the major decisions that he makes, the handling of Shane. Rick is the heart of the show. So like the way Andrew Lincoln played Rick was just amazing. And like you see the arc that Andrew Lincoln played, from the very pilot episode, like it's a very different Rick. He, not confident, not knowing really who he is at that point, to, season 3, season 4, going through this, like it's very, very different. And it's very awesome to see, how he plays it. Obviously like after Lori's death, he faces that identity crisis. There's moments of mental instability. And then, season 9 is really where like he leaves in a helicopter. And then it's like you really don't know what happened to Rick because you see him leaving in a helicopter. So it's like okay, so we knew that Andrew Lincoln was leaving the show, and we were hoping maybe for like a death or something, and then it was like, wait, he's leaving in a helicopter. Huh. Okay, that's interesting.
So I looked it up. Apparently, he actually has been around since the 90s, believe it or not, in 95. His first role was called Boston Kickout, was the movie. So he's been in some films, not probably enough to like be like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing. Actually, what I also didn't realize that he was British.
Yeah, he is.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Well, actually, no, I think I did hear a little bit, but he's been on TV for a little bit, but like he's only been in like, like certain episodes or like whatever. He's been like kind of like not the main character or whatever. Yes, Walking Dead was really his like, oh my God. Like he became who he was. But yeah, no, I was curious about it because like I never once seen him before. And I'm assuming it was because he was always on British television. That's probably why I never heard who he was at the time. But yes,
and you probably never see him again.
Well, it depends. I mean, it really depends because, it depends on how they want to do it. But yes, no, this is his iconic role, just like technically Norman Reedus, too, in that same regard. Like it's just.
But I think Norman Reedus, like, he obviously can play other roles, and I think he has played other roles. Like, I've seen him in other things. I mean, he was in Blade.
Okay,
for
now.
All things. I mean, he's been.
Oh, wait, no, you're talking. Oh, you mean the. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, he's been in other things, but I mean, I think, Andrew Lincoln, like, as good as he is, like, Rick was the role that he was in, and I mean, obviously, like the comic book, the comics look different. Who cares? I do think the comic, he does a faster descent into the brutality of who Rick is. Like the comics, like when you see Rick, like Rick gets brutal in these comics, like real fast, and the show.
It takes him a while.
It takes him a long time before he starts really getting to that brutal Rick that we see, like maybe in like season 6 or 7. Like,
oh yeah, like well, basically once he's seen enough pain in his lifetime, or at least in those seasons, yeah.
When he starts like really taking out the wolves, yeah, like yeah, that's or the saviors too. Like that's like
well, and that's the thing where if you would have saw him in the very, very beginning, I'm gonna say it, Matt.
Oh, I did. I watched like
no. Well, no. What I was meaning is like like when you see him in the beginning, like he's kind of a pussy. He's not. Really,
oh no, he is.
He's like that's what I mean. He's not really like this and that. But like once I will say it, Shane was the pinnacle point in his moment of becoming who he is now. Without Shane, oh no, I don't know if he'd ever reached that point unless there would have been something else to like trigger it. Probably his wife was probably, my guess is probably like the pinnacle point. But
well,
I
think
it would have taken a while though to get to that point.
I think Rick could have gotten there without Shane, but I mean, I think Rick always had it in there, but I mean, obviously Lori was
really
the driving point, and Lori obviously is Rick's wife and Carl's mother. She struggled a lot with adapting to the apocalyptic world.
Because who would want to do that?
Did you know the original pitch to Image Comics, Lori's name was actually Carol?
Oh boy, that would have been an interesting one.
I mean, ultimately, yes, it was changed to Lori before the issues came out, but her name actually before was Carol.
Well, thank God they changed it because that would have been weird.
I don't know if Carol was Carol in the books though before in this initial, but
yeah.
But her affair with Shane, does create tension. But in the book and in the TV show, they it's not like it's they had an affair. Like they both thought that Rick was dead. So that it's not like they were like, oh, my husband's gone. Like let's go do it.
No, they thought, no, because I know they didn't know. That was the problem. And
I mean, I put it more, I would put the blame more on Shane just being a dumbass and like.
Well, not even that, because I thought Shane knew where he was.
No, he did, but like, I in the TV show, it really doesn't explore it in the book, because in the book you actually see, him in the bed, and then he. But it really doesn't go back and explore that. And maybe it doesn't in text and context, which that's where you have to imagine how the scene plays out. Where in the show, like, that's where that slow burn is, because it goes back and explains.
True, and that's why I was saying the backstory about the first season, doing that piece of it.
But that's really where, like, when he was in the hospital and, like, everything, the hospital basically fell.
Yep.
And Shane was there. He put his head to his chest, and he said he couldn't hear the heartbeat.
Right, even though...
So he thought that Rick was dead. But instead of, like, being a real man and being like, you know what, I don't know if he's dead, I'm just going to pick him up and try to get out with him.
Yeah.
No, I'm just going to leave his ass here.
I know. And that was the issue.
I'm going to get myself out of here.
And then he's like, you know what? I'll wait, Lori, let's console her because you just lost your husband. Fuck that. That
was the thing with Shane. And, not to get, we'll get into Shane next, but, like, Shane always wanted Lori.
That's true.
It wasn't the other way around, but, like, they did have an affair. It does create tension, especially after Rick's return. In the book, it's a very quick burn. Like, they're, when Rick returns and they're reunited, like, it's Rick, Lori, Carl. Boom. There is no more Shane in their three lives. In the show, it's like...
There's drama.
Like, there's drama. Shane tries to keep coming in, and Lori has to keep reminding him, like, Rick is here. Like, you're no longer part of this scenario. In the book, that doesn't happen. It's the three of them, and that's it. And it's like you always kind of see, like, Shane in the background, like, adjusting his stupid little hat, or, like, you always see him in the background, but, like, that's where I think the two are different. But she does die pretty tragically during the governor's assault on the prison. And it's not just her. Judith also dies with her.
Right. Well, and I know
in the book.
Right, in the book. Because I know in the show, yes, I know Carl has to shoot Lori because I think, did she get...
She shoots her to prevent reanimation.
Well, right, because I thought... what was it? Because I thought she got bit, right? Didn't she originally get bit and then, like...
No, so Lori in the TV show, she made Maggie do a cesarean section to cut the baby out because she started bleeding, and she's like, I need to get the baby out. And Maggie was like, if I cut the baby out of you, it's going to kill you. And she was like, I don't care. If you don't cut this baby out, we're both going to die.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And then Maggie, like, cut the baby out. And then before Lori had died, she wanted Carl to shoot her. So,
well, yeah, that's what, yeah, right. But the daughter lives, though. That's the thing.
Yes. Judith lives. Yes.
I do remember. That's what I was trying to remember, because I was trying to remember that piece. But okay. Yeah, that makes more sense.
But the affair with Shane in the show, and she had more loyalty, shown on the screen, I think, to Rick. You could see it because it was more of a slow burn than it was in the book.
Well, I mean, technically, that's where this whole affair thing, like, later on, that's when Shane was like, because I know he started telling him the truth, and it was like, you're a fucking dumbass, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to fucking kill you. I wanted to do all this shit. And then he gets all pissed and becomes all that later on.
It's, like I said, it's a lot quicker of a burn in the comics. I mean, there's a whole scene in there where he's yelling at Rick and just flat out smacks him on the, across the face. And Lori, like, you son of a bitch, like,
yeah, you're like, whoa.
And that doesn't happen in the show. Like, that none of that actually happens.
No, but it takes time because because he's playing a role in the sense of, like, it's
a very slow burn. It's just,
well, he's waiting for the right moment, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
He was just like, well, with Shane kind of like taking the leader role or trying to, and then like Rick stepping in and say, hey, asshole, like, let's not fucking do that, because that's not a good idea to be, killing people for whatever fucking reason you choose to. Because again, now we're going to mention Shane here.
Yeah.
This guy, at first you're like, okay, maybe he's a true brother or whatever. Like, but then of course you start to learn about his like idiosyncrasies, things like he was just doing, and like he's like your asshole best friend that you're just like, you really like my brother from another mother, my ride till I died thing. That's what he was saying, or really like looking at when you're looking at Rick, looking at him. That's what he thought, and then of course he's like, well, fuck you, man. Piece of shit. Yo, that's right. I fucking pretended to hear, that you were really alive, but you're not, that I thought you were dead, and I'm just going to leave your ass and I'm going to take your wife from you and your kid, and just goes on this rampage, with that. And then he's just killing people because he just fucking feels like it. And he's like, well, we got to worry about ourselves and not, so-and-so. And it's like, bro, you want to talk about mistrust and everything else? Like that fucks the whole thing up pretty quick.
Yeah. He just gets, he descends into this madness and jealousy with Rick. Like it's really a rivalry. Like Rick does see him as his best friend, and like I think he wants to be Rick's best friend, but like I think he thinks Rick is better than him, which makes him, feel like he has to be better than Rick, and that's weirdly like.
Wasn't he a soldier originally before he became a cop or something like that? Because I was wondering if he had I'm pretty sure he had PTSD or some sort of.
Probably, but I don't know if the show really goes into that.
I don't know if it ever did, but that's what it reminds me of, because it's like he's going into like full PTSD mode. He's basically having a pissing contest with his best friend, who doesn't really know that he's having it with him, because he's still thinking, hey, this is my bro. Like, I will do anything for you, kind of a deal. Like you're my kid's uncle in a sense, kind of like doing that. But then, they're playing this game, he's just like, oh, fuck you. I wanted your wife. I wanted your life that you had, and I never got to have that kind of deal.
Yeah, it is. And it's that jealousy. Like, he's looking at Rick's life and he's like you, I should be you. Like you don't deserve what you have right now, because you should be dead. You were dead.
What he thought.
And he's like, Lori would have come around. Like he says this in the book, like Lori would have come around at some point.
Yeah, so you thought. Because
Lori it's like, what?
Because they were think about it. He was playing Lori too.
She wouldn't have come around.
Well, and once she found out of what Rick or what Shane was doing, I mean, she completely was like, "Get off me, leave me the fuck alone," kind of a deal. And it was like, and that you're right. I mean, that's where it wasn't Well, I guess it would be a little psychotic to kind of think that way. You're like, "Oh, she'll come around." Yeah. Fuck that shit. And you're like, no. If she knew the truth, what makes you think she'd want to come around at that point?
I mean, he basically wanted to be Rick. That's who he wanted to be.
Yeah, and of course he never got, because I thought he said something about like high school sweethearts or something like that in the show or something. I can't remember. Again, it's been so long. I thought they said something about like they met in high school, whatever. They got married.
Well, the thing is, in the show, they have this conversation before they go on the call, where him and Lori like are not having a good marriage.
Right, at this point, yes.
At that point, and he's having this like conversation where like they're just not getting along. Like he just doesn't know like how to communicate with her, and she's always pissed at him. And then like he kind of turns the conversation over to him, and Shane's talking about like how whoever girl that he was with.
Oh yeah, because he
like has this like thing about like getting pissed about like he wants to try to, turn off all the light switches, and then she's like being all pissy at him because, she doesn't turn off any of the light switches. But then she wants to be all eco-friendly, and he's like, well, you could be eco-friendly if you just turn off the fucking light switch.
Like, yeah, shit.
And he's like, he's like, it just pisses me off, and but he's having this conversation, but it's just that, I think he sees that like their marriage sucks. Like,
and he took the opportunity.
She doesn't love him, but maybe she would love me.
Right.
She doesn't deserve you. She's not happy.
Right. Having that opportunity.
Died. I can now step right in. I've always, it's just one of those things like. And in the comic book, it happened. Like I said, like we said this last week, it happens real fast. Happens right in the end of this book, this volume 1, and it's actually Carl, after they're like in both the, in each other's faces. Like, I think, when you look at it in the book, like, I think they're yelling at the top of their lungs. Like,
they have to.
Very, 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 very angry. Obviously, like, Shane is at a point where, like, he has a shotgun pulled on him.
Well, that too.
And, little Carl is, like, with him. They took him out hunting. Actually, it was Shane that brought Rick, and, Carl wanted to go along. So he's like, why don't you bring the lad,
Which in his mind was like, oh, let me just kill him too while I'm at it.
And, Carl being like, don't hurt my daddy. And he shoots Shane right in the neck.
Right.
Trying to protect his dad, and obviously in the show, you have to wait until the, finale of season 2 where, it's like Rick killing Shane. And then when Shane reanimates, it's Carl that
that gets him
ultimately, and then Carl, I just killed somebody. And it's the same in the book where, Carl's like, I just shot, a living person.
Well, he had to process that whole moment with Rick. But yeah, now moving on to Carl. You had one job, Carl. Anyways, I know that was kind of lame. I'm sorry. Anyways, so yes, so of course, Carl being Rick's son, and Lori's son as well. Carl grows up in the apocalypse, right? Because we're talking about a little boy. I would say he's probably got to be what, like 8, 9, maybe when the show starts. Ish. Like he's not a baby, but he's old. I would say he's like I would say he's probably about 8.
7, 8, yeah.
I would take around there. So like, again, growing up at a very, very shitty time, and of course now having to learn how to, survive at a very young age, again, being hardened and, becoming resourceful. And especially when you look at Rick, who, looks at his son and he's like, man, I don't want, this world for him, but it is what it is now. And I have to teach him how to be a survivalist, how to be a man, how to be in a very young age, but it has to be like the other. He is definitely, asking him more at that very young age. It's kind of like, in my opinion, it's kind of like, how like, older children or the oldest child will usually feel like they have to be the one that has to step up, and do other things, right? It's the same idea, but now just like, hey, guess what? Now you're going to go throw your ass into an apocalyptic world and pray to God you don't die, at a very young age. And it sucks. So again, another central figure in the story, which includes killing Shane as a child, as we just mentioned. Right. And then, becoming a soldier, eventually the leader of the group. Now, this is more in the comic, as we've already mentioned before. Yeah. In the show, not so much. He becomes kind of like a go-to.
He never really becomes a soldier, but
he becomes a go-to person. He become that.
He is a go-to person, but like he never really becomes like a leader per se or like a soldier. But
I guess he sort of kind of does. He's not quite like. Because
he's an important figure, but like he's never. He's definitely a fan favorite, but like as far as the comics, like he actually is a soldier and he becomes like the leader of the actual group. Like he does actually become kind of a badass character. Like,
right. And then like, so
a different character.
Well, and he also has a love interest technically in the comics that actually,
is somebody who died in the show actually.
Right. Which is Sophia.
Yeah.
But yes, no, I'm just, like having that piece. Because that would have been, again, there's so many things that, whether you kept it in the show or not kept it in the show, it would have been interesting. Because like I said, would the show have changed if Carl actually survived and maybe had a love interest too? Kind of taking that mantle role of like originally like Rick and Lori kind of a thing, moving on. Who knows? That's the key where we don't know. Unfortunately, they just
we don't. And he, in the comics, he survives the series and he does take on Rick's mantle of leadership. So the show, he's played by Chandler Riggs, which again, nobody really knew who he was. He was a kid, so nobody would have known who he was. Now he's not so much of a kid.
No, I think he's probably like in his late, or actually no, probably early. I would assume early 20s, but now I got to look this up. But go ahead.
But his growth in the show. You can see you can actually watch him grow.
That is true. You really can watch him grow
in the show, but it does diverge significantly from who he is in the comics. But he is killed off in season 8, much to the shock of the fans, because it does rob his story of that future arc as Rick's successor. And you can kind of see like this is one of like the Walking Dead's downhill steps, because one, Carl was a fan favorite, but like when you look at Carl being killed off the show, this was like season 8, and you see already like Rick left in season 9. If you still had Carl on this show
for as long as he was on the damn show for,
but if you still had Carl on this show when Rick was planning to leave already, Rick would never have been able to leave.
Correct.
Because Rick would have never left Carl behind.
That is true.
So now with Carl dead and no longer on this show, now Rick has no family left. And you can make the claim of like, oh, well, there's Michonne. Fuck Michonne.
Look, it was
Michonne has nothing to do with his family.
His OG family.
You can say like, oh, well, they're in a relationship.
Now.
Okay, great. But Carl was his son.
Correct, with Lori.
But now he has nobody else that is family.
Or his original family, yes.
And that was the actual reason that he was taken off of the show, was because Andrew Lincoln had already said at this point that he was leaving the show. With Carl still on the show, there would have been no reason for Rick to leave if he did not take at least Carl with him.
True.
Because he would have never left. He would have never left Carl by himself.
No, because he would have been his mentor, his guide, his whatever he needed him to be.
So that is exactly probably why Carl was killed off the show when he was, because it was a way for them to write Rick's character off of the show successfully in that way. And it's really a shame, because Carl had a future on the show that Rick didn't have.
That's true. After so long, yes. And also a little fun fact, Chandler Riggs, okay? He's 25. Believe it or not. I didn't realize. I thought he was going to be a little bit younger than that. But yeah, I guess he's a lot older than we expected. But yes, so Negan.
Good old Negan.
This motherfucker. Yeah, and I say it like that because, the first time you see him.
Oh, you love to hate him. I just
listen,
say it.
All I got to say is like I said, when I talked about it in the last episode, when he killed Glenn in front of everybody with his baseball bat and beat the living shit out of him. And I mean, I'm talking, probably one of the most brutal deaths. I wouldn't say the most brutal, but I would say it was up there. It was definitely, I don't know. I mean, I'm maybe pushing it at least in the top 10 of like deaths wise in the show. Like it sucked when Glenn was gone, because once it was literally, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was in the very first or second episode of season 6 that when Negan shows up is when Glenn, I want to say it was the first episode, because I remember it being I don't know if I cried, but it was emotional, and that's the reason why I said, Negan was one of those characters that it was an essence. Like he became this villain, and it was nice. Don't get me wrong, for the show, but it sucked in the very beginning, because you were like, shit, now how the hell are they going to get out of here or get out of this shit? But then of course, when Matt was saying in the last, episode, we were saying that, he becomes kind of like, because he then goes to prison, and he's like going from one jail cell to another and so on and so forth. But, when Negan, right. So again, like I just said, with killing Glenn, in a brutal introduction. Yeah. And as over time, he shifts from villain to anti-hero, eventually allying with Rick's group and helping to defeat the Whisperers. His redemption arc is a significant focus in later issues in the comics, which I didn't know that. I didn't realize that was. I didn't realize that Negan was actually essential later on. And especially, I didn't realize he was in the comics. I thought he was just maybe a character that was made up. But I guess clearly that's not the case.
No, he is. He is in the comics. I mean, he's one of the. I mean, he's right out of the comics, like Lucille and everything, like killing Glenn.
Yes, and by the way, Lucille is his bat. If no one knew, because yes, that I do remember that was his bat. So Jeffrey Dean Morgan, I will say, at first, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think he did an amazing job playing Negan, because I think if you had somebody else play him, I don't know, I think it would have been a hell of a lot different. But his take on it, I mean, damn, like when I say brutal, and when he killed people, it wasn't just like a, like a quick painless or like whatever death. It was like let me show you real pain for a minute.
Yeah.
And he showed you the pain. And when I saw Glenn's face, he was in agony. There was no doubt about it. There was no like bullshit. It was like, if you were in that situation, you would have hated to be fucking Glenn in that situation. That's all I got to say. Because I literally was like, I just want to go over there and beat the shit out of Negan right now. You know what I mean? Like, you just felt I want to beat your ass up right now, because that's how much, like you just said, like how much you want to love and hate him at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, Negan was definitely, charismatic, and, his personality definitely was like layered, just the brutality and the, I got to give it to like the hilarious quotes that he just.
Oh, he comes up with some crazy ass shit. I mean,
it was just like, it was just the things that came out of his mouth were just like the funniest things that you could, I'm trying to pull some up here, but
So like, I guess so. Well, while he's looking at it, I'm just going to mention a couple of things. So like, he basically becomes a critical ally against, Alpha and the Whisperers, through tensions with Maggie. Wait, what does that say? With Maggie Linger? I was confused by that last part.
Though tensions with Maggie Linger.
Sorry, Linger. Sorry,
wow. My first time reading, John?
Go fuck yourself, Matt, Mr. Motherfucker. Anyways, sorry. Though tensions with Maggie Linger. Sorry, Matt. Sorry, I just was trying to read that one little thing you had there. And then, yes, never really grew into the full potential of his redemption arc. So I don't really know a whole lot about that piece of it. I figured I'll let you kind of like divulge a little bit when it comes to that. Like, like showing, or like the, like what was lacking in that sense for him, like to get to that point of like redeeming himself.
Yeah. I mean, we did kind of mention this in the last episode, but like, it was just kind of like being the character that he was. Like you see him as this kind of like, with obviously the death of Abraham and the death of Glenn. And then, you see him just being this like unredeemable villain.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you were going to say more like, the fact that he kept going from prison or to the jail cell, to keep, like.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, you see him as this like unredeemable villain who he just keeps pushing the envelope like over and over again. Like you see him with his group, and like you see him just doing these things all, over and over and over again. But then like, his arc kind of shifts a little bit. Like the saviors are kind of done. He's on his own. Like he ends up, be in one prison because they capture him. And then he ends up in Alexandria, and he's in another prison there. And, he sort of, helps out with the Whisperers, and then sort of joins the Whisperers. Like, but like you are almost hoping for like an arc where he would be redeemed, almost to the point where you could see him becoming the leader that Rick was after Rick left.
Right, which would have made more sense if they decided to kill Carl off, in that sense. But at least that could have
even at that point, like, you're seeing like season 8 was where Carl was killed off. Rick left in 9. So you have the rest of 9, you have 10, and then you have 11. And Negan really wasn't much of anything.
True.
Most of the time he was really just doing nothing. And so that's kind of like what I'm talking about. Like, you have a guy that was like, and I'm going to read some of these because these are hilarious. Some of these quotes like, "You got some beach ball sized lady nuts on you coming all kamikaze like that."
I didn't realize that's what he said.
"You best bring that extra long tape measure on account of my humongous balls."
I mean,
oh my God. "Well, pardon me, young man. Excuse the shit out of my goddamn French, but you just threatened me."
So,
they're just pissing our pants yet. It's going to be a pee-pee pants city here real soon. Like, they're just so great. And there's so many of them. But like, you have a guy with so much damn charisma. And then he gets to a point where like, he just sits in a jail cell and has zero charisma. And it's like, yeah, okay. That's kind of a waste of a character right there. Like, you kind of just wasted a great character that you could have done huge things with. I mean, you changed Carol's character, so why can't you do something with Negan?
Well, so it's funny, and it's kind of weird. I don't know I'm going to mention this randomly, but like, how, well, because, Matt's favorite game of all time. What's that, man? Matt's favorite game of all time.
I'm not going to go there.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I guess I'll just go there. So Call of Duty in their infinite wisdom. I'm pretty sure at one point, I forgot if they had Negan, right? In one of the games in the last few years, I think I believe. Am I wrong?
I don't remember if they
couldn't remember. Well, I know they had Rick at one point. So it's just interesting how, like, you get a lot of these like really great characters, and I think Daryl, actually, now I'm thinking about it, I think Rick, Daryl, and Negan at one point were they were in a video game. I can't remember if it was Call of Duty or if it was like, it could have been Mortal Kombat for all I know. But anyways, not the point here. The point is like, when you have the potential of a character like that, especially where Negan kind of in his, like, this would be a great show. Imagine following Negan around. And
there is a spinoff with Negan and Maggie.
Wait, what? Seriously?
Yeah, there is one. With Negan and I haven't watched it because...
Is it new? Or is it...
It's newer. I mean, it's not as new as the Rick and Michonne, but again, if you can find it, unless you have cable, good luck.
Okay,
unless you have AMC Plus. Some of these, like, I think we can kind of maybe skip over because, we did talk about Carol in the comics. She's very different.
Right.
In the comics, she's more emotionally fragile, struggles with relationships. She dies by suicide. Her arc is very short. In the TV show, played by Melissa McBride, she's obviously one of the more dynamic characters. She's kind of meek, abused wife to very hardened. I mean, her key moment, she has a lot of key moments, but, one of the key moments is her, look at the flowers with Lizzie. She's like, hey, go look at the flowers.
Oh, yeah, no, because that's kind of where she became the Carol that we see in the show.
Yeah, and it's like, don't fuck with Carol.
She got pissed. I mean, she was.
If you're fucking with Carol, you're not going to be alive.
Well, that and her and Daryl, became really close later on too. Like like at first it was like, I don't want anything to do with you, but like later on they became like really good friends and whatnot. But,
Andrea, major character and one of Rick's closest allies in the comics. She develops into a sharpshooter and a leader. She forms a long-term romantic relationship with Rick.
I was trying to remember.
And she actually survives the series and becomes a mother figure to Carl. In the TV show, she's played by Laurie Holden. Her arc is very different and more divisive.
I was about to be like decisive. I'm like, whatever did you say?
Her relationship with the governor and decisions in season 3 make her more unpopular with fans, and then she ends up dying in season 3, bitten by a walker by choosing to end her own life. Just there you go. Kind of like a Carol, but
no, but I was going to say the total opposite though from the comics. But yeah,
Michonne in the book, actually, when she first you see her in the show, it's very cool because it's very similar. But she is a fierce katana-wielding survivor with a mysterious past. She becomes one of Rick's most trusted allies, has a complicated relationship with her own grief, eventually forms a romantic bond with Rick.
That's true, which is total opposite.
Man, he gets around in the book, man.
Yeah, he sure does.
Becomes co-leader of Alexandria, played by Denai. I'm pronouncing that right?
Yeah. Denai Gurira? Gurira?
Sure, we'll go with that. Michonne is a similarly skilled fighter and key figure in the group. So her TV arc explores her role as a mother figure to Judith and RJ, as well as her grief over losing loved ones. She leaves the series in season 10 to search for Rick, setting up the future spinoff that's
what it is right now, yeah.
What it is right now. Daryl Dixon does not exist in the original series, either does Merle. His, absence allowed the TV show to introduce an original character. Obviously, he's one of the fan favorites of the whole show.
The fact that he got his own damn spinoff, it says a lot.
Yeah, so he's portrayed by Norman Reedus. When you first see him, he's just a rough, antisocial tracker, very short temper, survivalist.
Yeah, he was kind of like your own, doomsday, or he was like a redneck doomsday prepper without, kind of seeing it at first. Because Merle was kind of the same way, but he was very hot-tempered, and he was just a complete asshole.
Yeah, all the time. Daryl lives in the shadow of his older brother Merle, but he does evolve into that central figure of Rick's group. He has his crossbow, his motorcycle. That becomes kind of his trademarks. He does start as this lone wolf, but he does grow into more of a selfless team player kind of guy.
It definitely took him a while, though.
Oh, it definitely took him a while.
It was not like a quick little thing, but yeah.
He does develop, close, relationships with Carol and Rick. He does, I think Rick and him have this really good, this really cool conversation when they're driving where Rick's calling him his brother and they just have this really cool conversation.
Well, it's because again, with Shane being gone and his dumbass ways anyways, Daryl, yes, he becomes his brother. He becomes his true brother. Because he's his loyal confidant. If he needed to talk, those two would be in a separate room doing their own thing. And it was just, you saw the connection that those two had. Yeah. And that was the key part.
And he's one of the, he is one of the characters that actually survived the entire series. And
that is true.
He did, he has his own spinoff, which I think is doing a season 2 or 3. I don't know. I forget.
Again, you'd have to watch it.
So some of the minor characters, again, we'll kind of go through some of these because these are kind of real quick ones. T-Dog. T-Dog's my guy. T-Dog was not in the comics either. He was kind of a quiet, but he was a really brave character on the show. He sacrificed himself in season 3 to save Carol. Whether he could have been more developed on
T-Dog, yeah. Oh, sorry, I had to look at him because I couldn't remember his ass. I'm like, now
I think whether he could have been more developed with more screen time, probably. But I think T-Dog was a really good character. Merle Dixon.
That was a really quick. That was first season.
Merle.
Or actually, was it second? Was it second season really?
He was first, but he did make another appearance later on. He added layers to Daryl's backstory. I think really is where Merle kind of came into play. He kind of just became more of a antagonist, anti-hero kind of character because, even though we saw him as this kind of dick kind of a character,
douchebag.
It really did make Daryl who he is. Merle pushing Daryl to be who he is. is really why Daryl is the way he is in the show. Like, so, you know, I don't know. Sasha. This is Tyrese's sister. Sasha became one of the strongest, most complex characters. Season 7, she had a tragic final stand in that. I think that was the prison.
Was that the prison?
Season 7, I think that was the prison.
I don't know. I thought that was earlier, the prison. I thought it was like 4 or 5, I thought it was before Negan. I mean, I could be wrong. If it is season 7, then I have no idea. I really thought it was earlier than 7.
Go ahead and talk.
Oh, well, sorry. I thought you were about to say something. My bad. Anyways, I don't know who Morgan Jones is, but
Morgan, season 1, black guy.
Sorry. No, sorry. I thought you were talking. I didn't realize that was the last name. I didn't realize Morgan. Sorry. My bad. Stop it. I didn't realize that's what you meant. I'm sorry. I thought it was somebody totally different. But okay, yes. So, yes, Morgan, sorry. Yes, who appeared briefly in the comics, yes, but had a massive evolving arc in the TV series, including his journey into spinoffs like Fear the Walking Dead. Yes, as we've already talked about. I do wish that, yes, instead of him like only showing up here and there, you're right. I think he could have became more of a prominent character, at least kind of like in the whole Daryl sense. Like he could have been an actual like fan favorite too, but I think that's where they just wanted him to be like, oh, okay, well he'll just show up at random moments out of the clear blue, and you're like, okay, cool. I'm glad we saw him in the first season, and we'll see him again at some point again, but it took a while, and then you see him in another spinoff, and then it's like, okay, well, you're right. Why can't you just explore more of the story, or at least behind him, or can he go join the group? I mean, I think he does join the group later on in the series, but I agree. I feel like they should have done more with him because he could have been easily another fan favorite on top of like, Rick, Negan, all of them. All right. What you got? You got anything, or are you still looking that up?
No, I'm still looking.
Okay, fair enough. So some things that were, missed, some opportunities, a little critiques here, Tyrese. Okay. I didn't really know anything about Tyrese here. So again, he's a key player in the comic. Tyrese had a powerful presence as Rick's right-hand man in the TV show, in the comics. Yes. In the TV show, his arc was notably diminished and he was overshadowed by other characters. Well, because apparently he wasn't important enough, man. That's why, because he can go suck it. That's why. And then, you go ahead. You got something now?
Yeah, the only thing is it was a season 7 finale. I don't know what the season 7 was. I believe it was something having to do with Alexandria. I think that's
probably what it was. I don't think it was the prison. Prison I thought was earlier than, I think it was like 4 was the prison, because I think 3 was kind of more the...
Yeah, it was something having to do with she wanted to get a weapon from Eugene, and Eugene didn't give her a weapon. So that's kind of where...
This is Sasha. I know we're going back and forth here, but
yeah. So that was kind of what it is. But were you talking about Tyrese, or did we already move on from that?
Well, it looks like we're going into Sophia. Actually.
So Sophia in the comics survives, grows up alongside Carl. Obviously becomes an emotional anchor for the group in the TV series. Her death in season 2 shocked viewers because she went missing. And primarily the back half of season 2 is the group looking for her. Like that's pretty much like nobody knows where she went. So that's like,
well, yeah, because then you're like, oh, well,
Carl gets shot and they end up at the Herschel farm, and the Herschel farm gets overrun. And then you find out like Herschel put all of the people who turned into the barn.
Well, yes.
And then,
wasn't he feeding his wife?
Well, yeah, because they were putting people into the barn to keep feeding them. But at some point, I think Sophia must have wandered onto the property, and they must have like just ushered her into the barn. Right. Because like when they go to like open the doors, she's the first one that comes out.
Right.
And it's like, oh my gosh, like that was, and it's kind of like, whether her death was like a bold storytelling choice or a missed opportunity to develop her into a character that could have grown up around Carl, we'll never know because they didn't.
Well, true, but in the comics, it was a completely different story. So again, that's why we're saying all this.
In the comic, Andrea, we're talking about Andrea and Dale. Their relationship was a cornerstone of survival, emotional support. Dale died pretty early in the show. Andrea really was really poorly received. And like I said, I mean, most of the time, like after her sister dies, like she just ugly cries the whole show. And then season 3, she just like, just bite me. Whatever.
Just end my life now.
Yeah.
And
that's really, they really don't dive into Andrea's story at all. Like she goes into this continued recycled storyline of like, I want to end my life. Nope. I want to live. I want to get out of here. No, now I want to end my life. Nope. I want to live. No, I want to get out of here. Nope. Now just bite me. So
yeah, that's true.
That's constantly like what she does on TV, and when Dale dies, that's kind of like what ends up happening. But in the comic, like Andrea and Dale were like, Dale is obviously very very much an older guy, like mid-60s, and Andrea was kind of like that. Andrea and Amy were like the daughters like that he never had. So like he really looked at like them two as like family. And so it was really like emotional support, and like they really had this like bond.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Dale was the one with the fisherman's hat, right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I had to remember him for a second, but yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Maggie and Glenn,
these two, I'm telling you, it sucks because like, like I said, when Glenn dies, because of Negan, I mean, yeah, Maggie's sitting there like bawling her eyes out and doing all this. And of course now her character, I think later on, I mean, again, I'm just assuming here, she becomes more dark. She becomes a lot more
darker. And this is where, fans of the series, kind of argue that they really diminished, Maggie after his death, because of how dark she goes, and like she really just doesn't do very. I think she leaves the show for a little bit, and I think it wasn't because of like his death. I think it was actually because she was pregnant or something.
Oh, could have been.
But she leaves the show for a little bit, and then she like comes back, and like her arc is very much darker, where she's like, "No, we're killing those motherfuckers." And you're like, what?
Basically, she becomes the female version of Shane. Yeah. And you're like, whoa, hey, that's not what we want here. But no, and then, so this one I don't really know too much about, but the whole, like, the governor's backstory, like the kind of like that missed opportunity kind of a deal.
Yeah. So, the TV show hints at his backstory, but never really fleshes it out. Okay. In the comics, like the governor's backstory and his motivations of why he's doing what he's doing is much more fleshed out. It's much more of a story than what the Walking Dead show actually portrays. It's much more tragic in the comics, and it makes him much more complex. Where when you see him on the show, like you just kind of see him, and you really don't get like that backstory until it's like almost over, and then you kind of like, oh, so like your wife died and you keep them in jars, like that's cool.
That's weird.
Yeah. But the book, the book like fleshes it out. It makes it more tragic. It makes him really complex. It makes him like a full-fledged villain where you want to hate him. And in the show, like it really stretches it like it does in every villain. Like it stretches it out, but doesn't explain a whole lot until it's like almost over. And then you like kind of get that like little bit of a reveal, and you're like, oh, well, that's why you're doing that?
That's fucking weird, you weirdo.
Okay.
Why are you putting your wife into jars, man? That's a little creepy. I'm just going to say it.
Abraham, his potential, he's a fan favorite in both mediums. His TV death felt really abrupt. I really didn't look into whether he died this way in the comics. I don't believe he did. I think they probably could have explored his skills a little bit further. Like, I really feel like, I think it was just Glenn that died this way. I don't know if it was like both him and Abraham that died at the hands of Lucille. I think it was just Glenn.
Oh, yeah.
So having Abraham die the same way was like, oh, so yeah, we don't get to see Abraham do anything else beyond this? Cool, whatever. But like, it just was really abrupt, and it was a missed opportunity. And I think like whether certain choices like this were made just for the shock value, like we're talking Abraham, we're talking Sophia, instead of serving like long-term character development.
Right, because I was also going to say even Glenn. I mean...
Well, Glenn always died this way, though.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but I mean, if you're already changing up the story, then what's the difference?
If you don't have Glenn die by Negan hitting him with Lucille, then you're changing not just the comic to the show, you're changing the whole thing.
Hold on a second. So this is the one time, even though they stick to the blueprint, that they're not going to want to change anything else, but they'll change every other character in some form of fashion, right? But this is the one time they're going to stick to the blueprint with one character so far.
Yes, we're saying yes.
But I'm just saying, because that is the one time they actually
We're saying like maybe Carol and her arc.
Okay.
But now you're talking like an actual blueprint item.
Right.
Where you're saying Negan, who is a villain, doing a villain moment in The Walking Dead by killing Glenn, you change that. Negan is no longer a villain doing villain things.
No, he's just being an asshole. But I mean,
so now what does Negan have to do? Like, Negan is no longer doing, like, he has to do something else.
Well, no, but that's what I'm saying.
That was always in the book. So if you need to do it in the show.
I'm just saying how the one damn moment is that. That is the only one that they've truly said, okay, well, this is the one moment we're going to stick to the book, and that's it. Everyone else, we're just going to do a little swab, little here or there. It didn't matter. I'm just saying, because what about Carl? What about everybody else that died? I mean, you can just throwing it out there. I mean,
you can say with a lot of it, and yes, then that's where we're critiquing some of the shows. Like, Carl had future, if you are going to dive much into the future, and season 8, I'm sure they didn't know that the show was going to go on for another 3 years.
Well, here's the other thing. I mean, yes, I will say this: Shane and Laurie, absolutely, I understand why they did what they did, because you didn't have those two, especially in the beginning, die, a lot of the show wouldn't continue.
Shane and Laurie always died because they died in the book.
Because that was blueprint. I understand that. But I was just saying, with certain key details here, when you were talking about Carol, right? Oh, she should have died, but now she becomes a badass, and Daryl not even being a part of the damn story to begin with. He's just in there with Merle, and so on and so forth. Morgan, I mean, hell, you only see him only a couple times, but I guarantee you see him a lot more in the comics, do you?
Not after you see him initially in the beginning.
Well, that's it. That's the one time you see Morgan. You just then see you later.
Well, I mean, I haven't read those in a long time, but I don't remember seeing him after I saw him in that first volume.
Okay, I didn't know if like you saw him again at some point or whatever the case is, but okay, no. I'm just saying, it just, to me, it's like you're willing to change a lot of characters depending on which ones you're talking about, but like certain moments, nope. Like I said, key details in the beginning, I get that. Later on in the seasons when they're already surviving for so long, and we got to do it now because God forbid we fuck it up and we don't actually do anything with it.
Like I said, with Glenn, it was always supposed to happen. Whether Abraham was also
a victim?
Supposed to be the victim too, is that shock value or did you have to do it that way?
I mean, I get what you're saying. I just, again, it just seems we're throwing it out there to everyone. It's like they're almost like choosing those moments to be like, oh, like you said, is it shock value, or is it going to be, just because we feel like it, or whatever the case is, or if there's a real life emergency with a lot of these actors or actresses. But the point was, yeah, I agree that it just doesn't make sense to me for certain things to happen the way they did, because you're right. I
mean, the original show, like the comics, like Judith wasn't there, and Sophia was. And now you have a show where Sophia's not there, but Judith is.
Right. So that's what I mean. You're throwing out people. You're keeping certain moments in there. You're not keeping those moments in there.
So now instead of, Rick, you now have Judith, who very well is the one who would take over the leadership role.
And that's the thing. And that's why here we are. This is why, The Walking Dead, the way it is, it's, I feel like they could have ended it after a certain point without having to continue the last 2 seasons.
Well, like I said, I mean, it started, 6 or 7 is where it started really just.
Yeah, I know.
It started slightly declining, and then, you see Carl dying, and then it just takes another, roller coaster down.
And you're like.
And then Rick leaves, and it's like another downhill roller coaster dive, and. Soon you're like, Negan's a pussy now, and Michonne's gone, and it's like it's Daryl and some other random people, and oh look, there's new random people, and there's random people over there. Oh, who's that guy? What the fuck are they doing on the show?
Who is this guy, and why are they here?
I mean, I watched the whole show, and I mean, towards the end, it was just like. I'm only watching the show so I can finish it.
Well, that and just to get context, to get certain things out of it. But yeah.
I mean, it wasn't interesting towards the end, but it was like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that is what it is. I don't know.
It's just, it's great about, like I said, I know we're dogging on the show, but it's
they didn't make good decisions at the end of it.
I will agree. I feel like they did amazing the first 5, maybe probably the 6th. Season. Other than that, afterwards, you're kind of like, what were you on? Why did you think that this was the right decision? And are you sure that's the best option for the circumstances?
It's still good. It's just not great. It's still good. It's just not. It's not great. Like the direction is just. It's like any other Walking Dead stuff that they've made. It just starts veering off, and you're like, ooh.
Well, where are we going now?
Where are we going?
I mean, it almost just seems
it's like when your parents go, oh, we're just going for a drive.
Don't worry about it.
Oh, so you have no idea where we are.
So we're just going to keep going.
Yeah.
No, I mean, so I will just say this real quick. Kind of like the closing thoughts here is just more like, you have a great TV show like The Walking Dead. You get all this hype. You get all the fandom and everything, like, oh, we're loving it, we're doing all this, and then it's like that great high, and then you're like, oh, here we go, we're going to go down, and how far do we go down, and how far do we low to, like, where's the standard at? Like, do we stop and then we like go back up again, or do we just let it keep riding down this shit train that we're about to continue to go on, right? Because like you were saying, right after that season 6, it was like, okay, well, fuck, what do we do now? Well, all right, let's just kill more people and see what happens. Is that really the best option, or was that just because you felt, fuck it, we don't care. We already rode the high roller coaster ride of like our lives here. Now we're just gonna dip down as far as we can fucking go and just say, fuck it, we don't care at this point. And that's kind of what it seems like, and it's pretty sad because we talked about it, how it became a platform for all these other TV shows, because without it,
yeah,
it didn't become a thing, and that's what's sad about it.
I still loved watching the show. I mean, it's still a good show. It just, it started just taking that direction, and, whether or not they made the best decision on the characters is not, it's not really for me to make that decision.
No, it's for you guys to make, actually.
I think they could have made better decisions, but at the end of the day, I think, The Walking Dead, is what it is, and it's still one of those franchises that is just iconic.
No, it'll be iconic in its own way, right? And it's not like it'll never go away. I mean, at some point, yes, people are going to be like, all right, we're done. I mean, that's what they could say about Star Wars and, Marvel movies and everything else that we've talked about in the past. But, it just gets to a point where, when is enough of enough, of like what you're watching? Like, I always think of like Fast and the Furious. Like, when is enough? When you're at 10, I feel like you're getting to a point of like, this is going completely the other direction.
I'll say this. I just started rewatching it, and
Which one? What are we talking about?
The original series. I just started rewatching The Walking Dead, and I'm actually loving rewatching it. Like it's actually really like rewatching it. Like we're in season 2 now, and it's like I'm actually like I forgot how good the show actually is.
I feel like it was kind of like when I was rewatching like Game of Thrones. I think I watched it to a certain point, and then I was like, okay, I'll keep it up, and then it just you get to that point of like. Like, oh shit, I forgot about this moment. Or like you have those like little epiphanies like real quick. And that's why I said I forgot about Dale, because I was like, oh shit. I'm like, yeah, that's right. He's the guy in the fisherman's hat or whatever. Like I totally forgot about him because he died in the very early on. And you're like, oh shit, you're right. I guess I didn't realize who it was. I couldn't remember certain characters because again, it's been so long that you just don't think about it. And
you have to go back or what? It's on Netflix. So
I gotcha. I got a lot of
gotcha.
I mean, never mind. I'm not going to say it. But anyways, boys and girls, anybody who likes to be called anything at this point who's living and breathing, not the Walking Dead here, we're going to sign off here. But I'll say this. If you want to follow us, subscribe to us. Come on, man. Help me out here. I always keep fucking...
Give us that fist bump.
There you go. Give us that fist bump.
Follow, interact, subscribe, and tell your friends.
Tell your friends. I know. I'm horrible. Look, man, I'm horrible. I'm sorry. Just punch me in the face now and call it a day. Can you do that for me?
I can do that.
Okay, sure.
I mean, maybe not right now, but
not right now. Okay, sorry.
Once we sign off.
Oh, sign off. Okay, gotcha. So, anyways, boys and girls, until next time,
stay geeky.